Hello, welcome to another episode of Down Lab with Doug. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to take the two circuits that we worked on, I'm going to expand again just a little bit further, and I'm actually going to apply it something into the real world. If you look behind me, I have this skull and I have this chest. And if I open up this chest, you should see the LEDs. Yeah, there's the LEDs, they're starting to blink. And if I close it, they turn off. It's like a dead man's chest. It's for a Dungeons and Dragons prop that I'm making, and what you see behind here is the code. So let me explain this to you, and I'll show you how I actually put this together. So the code right here is something that should be familiar to us. We worked with blinking the LED, and we also worked with firing off a buzzer in synchronization with the LED. Well, we removed the buzzer. We're just going to add an LED the same way. So I changed. We can't have two variables named the same thing, so I called the one LED R for right and the other LED L for left. I also created two other integers, a trigger pin, which I assigned to A0, that's another pin on the Arduino board, and I'll show you that later, and another integer called trigger state. I have another function here called serial.begin and 9600. This is the baud rate, and it actually has to do with this up here. This is just for a troubleshooting purposes, and believe it or not, I have the circuit actually working, and this is an on-off state, and it allows me to troubleshoot the circuit. I'm actually pushing the button right now. You can't see that. Again, I'll show you that at a later step. We'll run down through the code right now. The pin mode, again, we're going to set two LEDs, the left and right one, we're going to send the output. And we're also going to take the pin mode for that trigger state, and we're going to set it as an input. We are actually, on this A0 pin, we are actually, which means analog, we are actually getting, we want data from the outside world coming into this device. We want to sense what's going on. Once we get down into the loop here, I'm going to basically say here trigger state equals the digital read, here's another function, of the trigger pin. What that means is I'm assigning the integer, which I didn't assign this any value. I really don't need to because of this digital read. It's either on or off, 1 or 0, to the trigger pin A0, and that's what you see right here. When I push, when this is open, I'm getting ones, and it's reading the signal of A0, and when I hold it in, it gets a 0. And that's what the trigger state is. Those ones and zeros that you see right there coming across are actually the trigger state values. And in continuation that, just going right down here, this serial print, that's what I'm actually doing. I'm printing the trigger state to the serial output in order for me to troubleshoot. So I left that in there just for myself. Going back up here one more line. So in order to make this work, I'm putting an if condition in. If the trigger state equals high, then write to the serial, turn the right and left LED low, delay for a half a second, turn the right and LED high, delay a second. And then, just the opposite, if the trigger state equals low, I want to print to the serial the trigger state. That will give me my 0. And then do it high. Now this looks kind of backwards, and the reason why is I will show you here my above view. Turn light on for you. When this is, try to explain this correctly here. When the lid is closed, it's actually quite opposite of like a regular switch would operate. Because when the lid is closed, I don't want anything going on. When the switch is opened, I want stuff going on. So I have this like kind of an opposite state, and it reflects back here in the code, which is completely fine. And I don't know if I can do this for you so you can see in real time. Yeah, there we go. So I have the serial monitor up so you can see the troubleshooting, and you can notice here too I have the 5 volts. This is hooked into the A0 pin on this side, analog 0. And I'll explain this little circuit. Don't pay attention to anything over here. This is for a future project. We're only on this side of the board. There's a little circuit in here. You see that little resistor. It's basically set up here to be a drop-down resistor, which basically allows me to trigger this switch and drop it to a 0 volt. And that's how that digital read on the Arduino can sense what's going on. And if you take notice to the serial monitor over here, when I click the switch, also pay attention to the digital readout here, the multimeter that I have wired up, and you can see how when I go to 0, it reflects. And like I said, I use that for troubleshooting, which can come really handy. And then again, the LEDs turn on and off accordingly to that. So that's pretty cool. Let me show you. This is very confusing just because of the camera view and the small parts. Alright, sorry about that. I realized that you couldn't see my mouse when I was explaining this, and that would have made it very difficult for anyone to follow along. So to continue, what you're looking at here is the diagram of the Arduino Uno with the breadboard and the wiring and component layout. On the other side here is actually all the code that I used in order to make this work. So if you wanted to, you could pause the video right now and build this yourself, and it would work. Here I have the ground going all the way to the breadboard, and this follows the ground plane the whole way through. The +5 voltage does the same. It comes up here and it goes the whole way through. Like I showed you in the first video, blinking the LED, we take the +5 voltage to a 330 ohm resistor through an LED, the long side's on the positive side, and then we wire it to pin 7 on the Arduino Uno. We do the same thing for the other LED, and we wire it to pin 8, pin 7, pin 8. If you look over in the code, it reflects that. This little blue thing, ignore it. I forgot to take it out of the diagram. That actually won't do anything. Sorry about that. So here's the drop-down resistor, a little circuit that does the drop-down resistor. And if you look here, we have +5 voltage coming in, and it comes, when you push this, it'll complete the circuit, and it comes through here. It goes through this resistor, which is a 220 ohm, and it goes to ground, which completes the circuit. 220 ohm is basically in there to do the drop-down resistance from 5 to 0. But right in between here, what we do is we hook this up to the analog 0, and that's where we do this trigger state and this digital read to find out if it's +5 voltage or 0. Here's the Dead Man's Chest, the Dungeons and Dragons prop that I made. Open it up, LEDs blink. Got our treasure hoard going there. What I did, let's see up in there, I wired just 2 LEDs. I punched them through the foam. There's also you hear that, there's a trigger switch that I buried, and here is the this is what activates the trigger switch on the side. Underneath this is the actual circuit. Laying down underneath this, I pulled the tray out. Underneath this I have the Arduino Nano, and this has the same pinouts as the Arduino Uno. So, you know, this is kind of like, over here is your development board, and then you can incorporate on something like this to save space and also cost. These are cheaper. And I have these wired out. I need to clean this up. I have it so I didn't confuse the pins. Here's the battery pack, and I wired it back in the corner, all the stuff up through. So there you go. I showed you how we modified the circuit a little bit. I showed you a component list. I showed you a diagram. I actually even showed you how I wired it up. I hope that you enjoy this video, and I hope you go out and make something for yourself. Alright, take care. Bye bye.